Alright, guys, it's time for a fun video, and I'm gonna put some appropriate music in the background. Keep it nice and quiet. Some of you guys will recognize it. Alright, so with this all insane things playing out before us so damn fast, and things like the counterintelligence chief, who is, I believe he was a field operative, now basically taking command of the DoD as acting defense secretary because Esper got canned this morning. And I wonder what that was about, right? I mean, these are all these things that they said were going to happen. And also the social media stuff having weird ups and downs, and the censorship still happening, but it seems like the algorithms aren't being screwed with, and a lot of the messages are getting through that weren't getting through before, and I'm able to see people. I have a theory that I think Hammer's offline. I think Hammer's offline right now. I think we were seeing it active, and then I think it's offline now, just based on kind of what I see. So, yes, do I approve of that? No, of course I don't approve of that. I'm floating that, right? I'm saying let's live in the world where Hammer's offline, and now Hammer's a location, and there's kind of one or two things that have happened. Either we busted it, or they packed up and ran. And the question is, where were they? Where was Hammer? If you guys are not familiar, I'll refresh you. Hammer is essentially the weapons system that is essentially the supercomputer system that does the basically hyper surveillance. And the best way to describe it is, I should say, of course, I don't know the in and outs of how it works. I'm not a supercomputer programmer, right? But the best way to describe it is, some of you guys have heard of the program called JAWS. And what JAWS does is, it was an NSA program, and they blew a whistle on it because JAWS is actually software, but it's a computer effectively. It's a system. JAWS grabs every single email. Doesn't matter whether you encrypted it, whether it was encoded. Basically, if it goes through servers, it grabs it and copies it, and that means anything you send in an email is completely it's completely accessible. There's really is no privacy, other than basically you just have to hope that the legal system says it's okay. Is that how WikiLeaks got some stuff? No, probably not. They probably got that from private leaking. And it does take, a pretty good amount of warrants, technically, to get access to the JAWS stuff, because NSA right now are the only ones who have it. Do the Chinese have it? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. We're not sure what's going on with that stuff, right? But that's the kind of technology, in the sense of, like, well, how is Hammer able to do these things? And also, it's like, well, I mean, how are you able to hack into all email systems and grab all email traffic? You're able to do that. And then also, it's going to take a sophisticated AI to sort through that, too, because that was one of the things about the phone call wiretapping with the Patriot Act I hadn't really been super worried about, because it was basically, the idea was like, all the phone calls are getting routed. And if early on, my worry was like, I was like, yeah, but they don't have the personnel or the time to sit and listen to each thing. Well, they didn't when they started, but I got news to you, they got a computer that can go through it. So I'm willing to bet if JAWS exists, then the phone stuff that's being routed, we're being told that, oh, it's only used for certain things. No, that weapon system is online, period. We have to just assume it is. And the question is, are they looking at you to mess with you? So all that said, where is Hammer? Where is Hammer? Well, I think it can be a couple of different locations. And this is a big old map of the internet. I just want to have something up so I can point while I'm talking. I think Hammer is the first place I say is the most conventional. This is if it were a TV show being filmed, where it would be. Either New York, DC, LA, one of these major, heavily well-powered, well-interneted cities that are, with a sea of buildings to hide things in, and tons of corporate corruption and whatnot, and just, a generally nice place to live. And this software is running in the basement somewhere, because, we know the CIA, they run stuff in the basement of the Pentagon and whatnot. There's no reason a private place couldn't own something kind of similar, right? So it's in a city. It's right there by the feed of the media that's going out, and that's the most important thing that they seem to be focusing on. So that makes sense, right? That's where, if it was, what the hell was that show with Jim Caviezel, and he was like, he was like fighting some sort of computer terrorist system that would give like the social security numbers of people who were at risk or possibly threats or something. I forget what it is. It wasn't called The Pretender. It reminded me of that show. I don't remember what it was called. But that was like, it's always in a city, right? It's always in a city. Now, and that's where I think possibility number one is. And it's just because it's practical. Possibility number two, I think, could be a black site within the United States. And this is the video game option, if it were in a video game. Somewhere within the United States that's one of these like ex-black weapon sites or something that was constructed for the military, a bunker, things like that, something with a lot of infrastructure going in that's super secretive and super tight, but it's being operated by a contractor or subcontractor, and probably the military doesn't have much or anything to do with it, right? That's the fortress idea, that it's being kept in some secret place, some secret bunker that Skynet's tucked in. But it's also not a super impractical thing, particularly if you've got corruption within the military and within the subcontractor process, where it's like, they're going to keep your secret and, nobody can just walk in and spy on it. If it's in the city, you can, in theory, spy on it, right? So that's option number two. Option number three is it's in a foreign country. And it's actually outside of the continental United States because you don't want to get caught. And I think honestly, if I had to actually guess, I had to actually, bet money where I think it is. I think it's in Ontario. I think it's in. I guess I forget what city this is. I think it's in Canada. The reason why I think it's in Canada is because there's too many connections of what we have going on, from everything from the armies, the subcontractors who essentially took control of the army's weapon system, which we now know as Hammer. There's too many companies that have connections to Canada, including Dominion voting systems, including stuff with the Clinton Foundation, including programs that are routed with the UN that, Donald Trump's not going to get involved with this UN bullshit because we're pissed off at them. But Canada, they bend over and they suck, they take it up the ass and suck the UN's dick at the same time. And I don't know how they do that, but they do manage to do that. That's what the Canadians do, because they're just the nicest people. Now, I'm not saying, it's the government of Canada trying to undermine the United States. No, that's not what I think at all. I think the government of Canada would just probably rather just be left alone, and that their crazy neighbor doesn't start a war every once in a while, right? But they're happy. They're more happy to have us than not have us, because they would probably be speaking Russian or German by now if it wasn't for us. So, whatever. Canada. I'm not crapping on Canada for this. But what I think is that you've got the same powerful elites. You've got the Clintons and all these other people who are utilizing this kind of technology, doing this kind of stuff, manipulating things, and basically using weapon system to project basically who's going to be in charge of the most powerful government in the world. And the Canadians are kind of a really good hub of the British, the United States, the Chinese. Everybody who's essentially stuck in this circle right now of shady bullshit and money and being tied to the weapon systems and blackmail and all these things happening at one time. I don't think it's happening in Wisconsin. I don't think it's happening in Missouri, in the middle of nowhere. I think if you're going to do your shady dealings, where the U.S., not only does the U.S. not have necessarily eyes on it, because it's not within the continental United States, so there's less likely a chance of a patriot blowing the whistle or really anybody knowing what the hell's going on. If you put it in a place like Canada, the United States doesn't have the ability to go send in, SEAL Team 6 and go bust this up or do something or implement CIA spies and all this other stuff. There's not any assets on the ground, United States intelligence-wise, in Canada, not nearly as much as if they were to be doing it in Europe, or if they were for instance, if they were doing it in China, right? We're constantly running other operations, and we have spies in China who are trying to watch what's going on for basically the United States' best interest, right? So if you run some sort of, your evil cabal bullshit, right, this Hammer program, and you stick it in Beijing, right, inadvertently you're going to run into NSA, CIA, FBI even, who are undercover or researching or doing things, or military intelligence, who are going to then basically coincidentally come across what you're doing and try to, and at least forward that information back to the administration, back to whatever's going on. They may not know what it is, but what it will do is it'll put you in the cycle of basically the crosshairs of the people who are actually looking for bad guys. They don't know, but they might not know what Hammer is, and they might not know you're involved at all. They might be investigating something completely different, like nuclear weapons trafficking. But if you put it in a hostile country, or if you put it in Europe, where we're always kind of trolling around because the Europeans are always doing shady stuff, the odds of us basically spying on it and finding it a lot higher, right? You place it in some place like Canada. Do you think there's a CIA annex in Ontario spying on the Canadians and the Canadian industry? What are those evil Canadians up to? No. And then if something went wrong and it was in Europe, we could send U.S. Army, Europe, we could send all these different groups, right? Because we have kind of, not autonomy, but we can do some stuff and twist some arms with NATO up here. We have a lot of military force here because the Russians were here. If it was in China, we could, point a huge spotlight on it or send in basically an SAD team or something like super dark and fuck everything up, right? We could be breaking things and doing black ops things, and nobody would know, nobody would complain. It would actually give us a lot of leverage because it would be like, oh, there was a small explosion, and by small we mean, multiple tons of TNT in some building, and it was an industrial accident, and really we were blowing up the whole system, right? And the Chinese, what are they going to say? Oh, the Americans did this, and then we would say, well, yeah, we did this because of this thing that we're now exposing. Or, it would be a thing where, like, oh, we discovered it, right? And then all of a sudden, we'd have the mandate to, like, arrest people for treason and stuff, and then we'd be, like, on the brink of war with China. It would be this whole mess, right? And then what are you going to imagine? The Clintons and all these other people with their money and stuff fleeing to China? That ain't going to happen. If they even make it, that's not going to happen. But if you're in Canada, if you're in the lovely city of Ontario, you got a lot more going. It's a lot easier, right? And the CIA is not going to be spying on the Canadians. We're not going to be suspecting, that the Canadian businesses are doing weird, deep state, weird stuff, right? And if we were to some reason discover something in Canada and we had to go, hey, we got to go bust these guys, right? You think the FBI is going to show up in Canada or the military is going to go like do a raid in Canada? It's not going to happen. There's too many hoops to jump through. Because instead of it being like a NATO thing where we can just send in like a NATO spec ops team, in Canada, although they're part of NATO, it's still like, could you imagine the scandal if we sent a raid team and then it turned up nothing or something into like a building, and it was like some black ops shit we were doing against the Canadians? They would know, and then they would go public and be like, "What are the Americans doing? They're abusing them." It would just be an international disaster. And there's also no assets on the ground. We don't have a hostage rescue team in Canada for like we do for like FBI, where we sit them all over the world, because the Canadians don't take American hostages. There isn't that risk. Now, I'm sure we do have some assets in Canada because of the fact that the Chinese are basically always kissing the Canadians' asses, and the Canadians let their guard down and, for instance, do things like sell all their PPE to them before the pandemic back in December. Way to go, guys. Way to go. So that's not, it's not like we have, oh, we're blind, we can't see in Canada. It's an iron curtain. No, of course not. Of course not. In fact, we probably have better eyes in Canada than we do in some place like Russia or really deep China. But we also don't have the, like Americans going back and forth between the borders and stuff, and businesses that are multinationals between, like Dominion Voting, who's, Denver and Ontario. Like, nobody's like, that's suspicious, But if it was like, some joint company between China and, some place out of San Francisco, you'd be going, all right, okay, we better double check those shipments because something's scary here. But if it's like Canada, it's like, the Canadians, they're completely innocuous. And the Canadians aren't thinking to look that, their elite cabal are coordinating with an American elite cabal who are also selling out to the Chinese and utilizing British spies to make up Russian fake intel. Canadians are like, we are way too boring for something like that to be the case. It's just not something that they're going to be really looking for. So that's my long, fun tinfoil hat rabbit hole explanation of where I think, if they find Hammer, where it is. The other option is that it's actually mobile, and it's actually a mobile platform, which is also, I would say, probably probably close to 50% likely, and they just move it and they place it and operate it wherever it's supposed to be. If I were designing this system, I would design a mobile system, but we don't know what kind of resources they have, and a bunch of parading black vans or long semi trucks trying to get into places to then connect to the internet stream, it might not be so easy, right? But then again, that one dude had basically a version of the system the Shadowgate guy was talking about. He had it on his bike, where he was bouncing into the 4G and doing stuff, and it's like, hey, you know what? Maybe it's decentralized. Maybe it's actually online in multiple places at once, and then it all kind of acts as one supercomputer, because it's like, because they're spread out all over the place, like a almost like blockchain, almost like a what they call it, where it's the multiple computers all working together, but they're in different spots. I forget what that's called, but that's possible too. Is that maybe there isn't some super hideout with hammer, and there's some like commandos going in there and trying to stop it in time before the date is destroyed and the election is rigged, right? Some Manchurian candidate level stuff. Maybe not, right? But they did say we know where hammer is, and someone doesn't say we know where hammer is unless it actually exists in a physical place, And that's the thing. I would expect there actually is a physical thing, because if you were to do something like upload the software everywhere, right? Like, oh, it's Skynet, it's everywhere, it's inescapable. It's the GW system from whatchamacallit, from Metal Gear Solid 2. Yeah, hear the music. It's like, well, then you're asking for, oh yeah, every phone's got a software update that's going to be running this. That means any device you could then backtrack and figure out what's going on, and that would be a problem. But instead, it's more likely they're basically infecting subsystems. Like I said, you talked in the last video, or did I say at the beginning of this one? You talk to Siri and you ask, like, oh, how old is the president of the United States, and then it gives you an answer like Kamala Harris. That's not Apple. That's not my phone has been hacked. It's literally just Wolfram. It's AI going, herp to derp, I think for some reason this is an appropriate answer to give, which is something, Hammer would be doing, right? And that's a much easier way to, it needs a nexus, because something has to coordinate these things. And also, it's not an automated system. That's the other thing. You have to actually put in the parameters to get it to do stuff, which means somebody has to be there actually putting in data and stuff. And if it, like, otherwise it's like, how are you going to operate it, right? What are you going to do? Like, if you're the, the person who wants to, like, lean things or shift a race or something, you're just going to bring up your iPhone and do it, like, from any iPhone? Of course not. You're going to have to actually be at the physical location. Otherwise, that means it's counter-hackable, right? Or let's just say a lot more counter-hackable. But whatever. I thought that was just a fun thing. I'd love to know what you guys think. Odds are of this all being me being completely wrong about this are very high. Please take it with a grain of salt. Just have fun with it. But I don't know, man. We live in a weird world. So we'll see. I've made wild guesses like this jokingly before, and I've been right. Who knows what's gonna happen this time? And in all fairness, I am laying out a kind of a wide scope of possibilities here. And if I even get one of them right, I'm gonna feel like, yeah, I knew. It's like, well, I didn't really know. I had too many. I literally had too many avenues to actually investigate for one person. So whatever it ends up being, I kind of hope it surprises me. I hope it's like let me think, like it's like Finland or something. Oh, those Finns. Not that I hate Finland, but it just would be really funny if it was like something, some random obnoxious country. That should be the Cubans, right? But the Cubans don't have, like, fast enough internet, so it doesn't matter. Or, sorry, who are the Cubans? Actually, do they even have any lines going to them? So, this could be wild. But I do think, yeah, probably Canada's stuff. But also, it's like, who in the Canadian agencies can we trust right now? We don't know. Justin Trudeau's running the show over there, and he's cut from the same cloth as the Clintons, so we'll see. I mean, wouldn't it be amazing if this fraud took down basically the U.S. power structure, and then it took down the Canadians, and it did all this? Man, we could see 2020's season finale could be absolutely insane. And it could also be just like, oh, all right, well, I guess that happened. So we don't know. 2020. Whew. What a year. What a year. So let's have a little bit of fun, keep the spirits up. And I'll catch you guys later.